So I love this. People always think about DEI strategies and how can we make sure that they're successful? Well, you've got to think about how your DEI strategy is connected to the business strategy. It's not separate. It has to be integrated. It has to be woven into the work. It has to be aligned to what the business is trying to achieve. And if you can look at what your foundational parts that must be done, call it minimum requirements, call it legal requirements, and what do you then need to build, and how are you building that in line with what the business is trying to do?
To make a diversity and inclusion strategy successful takes leadership. If no one knows that the leader is behind your strategy, no one knows that it's driving the organisation forward, then it's going to be really hard to get people to prioritise it.
I think the key thing to making a DEI strategy successful is really getting it embedded across every single level. Downstream communication across the board, making sure you reach every level of an organization is absolutely essential, because quite often you'll see very senior leaders who have wonderful ideas around inclusion, and then it somehow gets lost in middle management and never really translates down to the broadest communities. So I think really managing to communicate simply and effectively across a whole organization at every level is how you really get it embedded.
Ensuring that it speaks the language of the business. I've seen quite a lot of examples of people coming into a new industry or a new organisation and making assumptions about what they think that space needs when it comes to EDI, and kind of rushing in and not necessarily taking the time to stop, to listen, to really understand the culture as it exists at that moment before then sort of launching into, and this is what we need to do to improve it. It's definitely speaking the language of the business, but also the different parts of the business. Not everyone's at the same space in terms of kind of EDI maturity. So it's definitely about kind of understanding that, bringing people on the journey along with, kind of with you as whatever role you play in EDI, and getting the leadership buy-in. I think if the leaders aren't championing it, role modelling it, shouting about it from the rooftops, it kind of makes your job a little bit harder, in the sense of it being embraced fully and adopted across kind of every layer and every part of the organisation.
A DEI strategy can only be successful when it's really about every single thing that an organisation's doing. We often talk about the role of leadership, and leadership is obviously critical, but we sometimes forget that managers, middle managers, and then every single person in the organisation has a role if we're really going to bring diversity, equity, inclusion to life within an organisation. So for me, it's about making sure that we really connect DEI to business performance. They're not separate things we need to balance. They fuel one another. And if we can get that right, really make sure that it's the living, beating heart of the organisation, and that's when strategy makes a difference.
There's so many versions around a DEI strategy. Some people think that a data-driven strategy is important. Others think that if it's embedded in your broader strategic framework and having a statement around ED&I is key. I think for me, what makes a good EDI strategy is in the implementation. Apart from the matrices, I think it comes down much more to how people feel and engage the organization than whether we have 50-50 gender balance or racial balance. Those optics are important, but I think it's more the environment, the inclusive environment, and how people feel in that space, and whether they feel that they can bring their whole, I didn't say authentic self, but their whole identity into the space. Yeah.
So I think buy-in is so important to strategies. So those focus groups, listening circles, the involvement and commitment from your exec and your board, all those things really help drive an inclusive, a good inclusion strategy. And they're quite difficult to do. I think they're quite nuanced, and they take quite a bit of time. But if you can get those into your strategy, then I think everyone feels it's their strategy and will help deliver it over the 3 or 5 years of the strategy.
A successful DEI strategy is one that is fully embedded in the wider business strategy. It needs to be fully part of developing that strategy and communicating that strategy to everyone, both internally and externally. And if it's delivered or created as a silo, then it just never really works as well as it could. So it's one that is part and parcel of the wider business strategy as opposed to something that's just over there in the sort of fluffy area of business.